Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. A good blanket will keep you warm, but a handmade temperature blanket can convey a message to a loved one.
It's not just a blanket to put over you, but it has a little bit of meaning behind it. And I hope that you realize I was thinking of you with every row I put in the blanket.
Since 2018, there's been an explosion of LGBT writing about Appalachia. We talk with the editor of the new essay collection, Deviant Hollers.
There is something inherently queer, not just about being LGBT in Appalachia, right, but the whole region itself.
And there's an alternative to invasive bamboo, and it's native to the region.
We are looking at baby river cane plants. Little scraggly things, but they have a lot of charisma.
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. Temperature blankets are a popular project among crocheters. They began as a way for fiber artists to document the daily temperatures of the year, using red yarn for record highs and shades of blue for the cooler days. But the tradition of telling a story through textiles goes way back to ancient times. Folkways reporter Wendy Welch has this story.
When Sierra Pike crochets, she feels peaceful, which is ironic because she crochets on the couch at night as her husband and sons race around the house shouting and playing.
I crochet to help me relax and everything during the evening because I'm a working mom, and I just love to be able to sit with them, enjoy their sounds, while I also regress into my own little world.
Sierra lives in rural Retreat, Virginia. She is creating, or more accurately commemorating, a world within her crocheting. Sierra is making a temperature blanket. Each row represents a day in the year she has chosen to capture in yarn.
How I understood the temperature blanket was tracking important moments in your life. Oh, that's how the weather was that day? I never would have thought about that, but that was really special. Like, it's just, you can kind of look back and they're all different colors. They're all the same colors in each row, but it all tells a story.
Some crafters stick to colored stripes rendered in single crochet, the simplest of stitches. Others choose more complicated patterns like granny squares or rippled rows. What the blanket records can be as casual or deeply layered as its creator chooses. For the blanket Sierra is working on now, she chose to dive deep. She uses a raised puff stitch that looks like a little pillow to commemorate
date nights, games that my boys have played, things that I know I'll be able to look back and just be like, oh, that was a really special day. The one that I really wish I would have put on there, we saw an otter in a local pond. So he's probably getting a charm.
Charms or buttons can mark special events. During the COVID years, people wove black ribbons along a row to commemorate a loss. Many still do this, plus use white, blue, or pink to note family additions. Textile storytelling is common to most cultures, but Sierra got inspired after watching a documentary about Aztecs and Incas weaving and knotting symbols into clothing and calendars. Veronica Rodriguez is a Spanish professor at the University of Virginia's College at Wise. Her studies include how ancient Mesoamerican cultures used symbols in clothing.
Textiles were used to record history, right? How the colors meant something, the design meant something.
Veronica joins Sierra in seeing temperature blankets as part of a long-standing cross-cultural tradition of people using textiles to tell stories.
And, I think it's great that people are using those fabrics to tell a story because it's handmade. And it's art, and they learn from their grandma and their mom, and it's an ancestral sort of thing. And I think that's something that we don't appreciate. So using that art making to tell stories, I think is pretty important.
The oldest preserved example of a story on cloth is arguably Europe's Bayeux Tapestry, completed in 1077 to commemorate the Battle of Hastings. In Appalachia, telling stories using quilts appeared with the first settlers, while indigenous weaving and embroidery depicting community events were here long before they arrived. Chris Knight sees making temperature blankets as a combination of family documentation and affection. A retired pharmacist from Wise, Virginia, Chris made temperature blankets for her husband and brother, chronicling significant years in their lives.
It increases the thoughtfulness of the gift when you can say, I made this for you and I chose this year because it meant something in your life. So it's not just a blanket to put over you, but it has a little bit of meaning behind it. And I hope that you realize I was thinking of you with every row I put in the blanket.
Her husband's Afghan documents the year they met. She used his favorite sports team's colors, which necessitated hunting down 6 shades of purple and 3 of gold. But it isn't just the recipient Chris is thinking of as she crochets. It's also the person who taught her.
55 plus years ago, my grandmother taught me. I like keeping it alive. It keeps me close to her, even though she's gone.
And sometimes Chris couldn't tell you what she thinks about as she moves her hook through the yarn in a repetitive, fluid motion. Even when concentrating on a complex pattern, she finds herself lost not in the memories she's capturing, but in the zone.
In that zone where I'm thinking about something else, but my hands are working, and I'll get to the next row and think, what was I thinking about 5 minutes ago because I can't get my hook in this stitch?
Karen Long, an Armed Forces widow living in Hillsville, Virginia, also likes zoning out while crocheting. Karen learned from her husband's grandmother.
My husband's grandmother came to visit one weekend. I told her, I said, Grandma, I want to learn how to crochet. And I went and got some yarn and a crochet hook, and she sat down with me, and by the time she left, I had made a pair of slippers and a triangular type poncho thing for my daughter.
Karen followed that up over the next 30 years by making an Afghan for each of her 12 grandchildren. This includes a posthumous one for a granddaughter murdered by her partner. Karen donated that blanket to a domestic violence fundraiser. She's glad her granddaughter's blanket can serve a good cause. The 2 temperature blankets Karen is making right now are for herself. One records high temperatures for the year, the other lows. They give her space to think about whatever she wants, like the highs and lows of her own life, or not to think at all.
I enjoyed keeping up with it because it gives me a sense of, hey, I'm sticking with this. I can sit and do it and watch television at the same time, or just kind of space out while I'm doing it.
That sense of groundedness meets zoned outness is ubiquitous in making these Afghans. And they also knit the past and the future together, says Sierra Pike.
Memories are what makes the world go round. They keep us grounded. They make us strive for more. And if you can have a visual representation of that in front of you every day, it's something that's going to go for generations.
From pre-written history to the present day, people capture the great and small stories of their lives in fiber, following a perhaps primal urge to record memories in their own creative, coded way. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Wendy Welch.
Wayne Henderson has been making guitars since he was a teenager. The guitars he makes now are prized by players who are willing to wait up to a decade to get their hands on one. Henderson's handmade instruments are played by some of the most notable musicians in the world. So it's not all that surprising that his daughter, Elizabeth Jane Henderson, grew up wary of building guitars herself. After all, it's hard enough for kids to grow up in the shadow of a celebrated parent, much less follow in their footsteps. But now, Jane's carrying on the family tradition, in her own way. Folkways reporter Margaret McLeod-Leaf has this story, which first aired earlier this year.
I'm in Wayne Henderson's workshop in Rugby, Virginia, with his daughter Jane. Wayne is checking out a guitar Jane recently built.
Very nice sound and tone.
This is high praise. Wayne has made guitars for everyone from Vince Gill to Eric Clapton. Wayne charges about $5,000 for a new handmade guitar, but they can fetch much more on eBay and other secondary markets. He taught his daughter Jane to build guitars, but it wasn't something she learned when she was growing up. Jane says, back then, she didn't have any interest in hanging around her dad's shop. There were too many other people vying for his attention.
I wanted to be special. I wanted to feel like he was my dad and not Wayne Henderson, the guy that everybody just reveres and thinks is just the coolest. And I was like, I don't want anything to do with this because I don't want to have to stand in line for my dad's attention.
So Jane followed her own path. She went to college and got a master's in environmental law and policy. But pretty soon, she realized her nonprofit salary wasn't enough to pay off her student loans. So she asked her dad for help.
And she said she had this loan, student loan going on, I guess like all kids that go to school do. and she said, I'd love to pay this loan, and said, seen what your guitars bring, would you make me one that I could sell on eBay or somehow?
But Wayne had another idea.
I told her what you need to do is make it yourself. I told her, I'll help you. I'll give you my best wood. It'll be one of my guitars, which means it's got to be done exactly right, and I'll probably make you do stuff over.
When I started that first guitar, I thought it'd be terrible. I'm like, fine, I'll do it because, they sell for a lot of money on eBay and I got to pay back these law school loans. And what happened, I loved it so much, and I got to stand next to him instead of in line to be, the next groupie or whatever. I got to stand there with him, and he showed me how to do things. And we had a level playing field to chat about things. We had something in common, and it was the relationship that I got that I never really got to have growing up.
Turns out, Jane had a knack for building guitars. That first guitar sold for $25,000 and put a hefty dent in the loans. It wasn't long before Jane was hooked. Within about 6 months, she quit her environmental job to build instruments full-time. Traditional guitars are typically made from imported woods like Brazilian rosewood and mahogany. They're not always sustainable. But Jane makes hers from locally sourced and reclaimed wood. She also makes ukuleles from smaller scraps of wood that might otherwise be discarded.
My passion lies more in preserving the natural world. I want to do that, and I get to use this platform to sort of push the things that I like.
Jane gets wood from a few different sources. One of those is just around the corner from her home studio in Asheville, North Carolina. It's called Scrounger's Paradise. It's a good name for it. There are stacks of cut and planed wood from all over the world.
Is that beautiful or what? That's original chestnut before the blight came into North Carolina.
Owner Mark Oliveri keeps tabs on wood that he thinks Jane might want.
You like it?
Yeah.
And it reminds me of white oak.
It does.
Jane taps the wood to see if it has a good tonal quality.
I mean, you can...
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
You can tell. So the cool thing about this, this or like oak, it doesn't ring quite like Brazilian rosewood, but the density is really similar. This stuff has more of a bell
it does.
That's just ding instead of a
Choosing the right wood is just one part of Jane's process. Today, she's using a jeweler saw to carve abalone shell to make a pearly decorative inlay on a guitar neck. Jane's known for her custom inlay. She designs each instrument for the person who will play it.
I like getting to know people. I like hearing their stories, where they've walked, what they've done. I love that. So I really try and focus on the person, on the human that is asking me for something.
Each guitar takes a little over a month. Jane says making guitars has become more than her livelihood.
I don't do this because I want to make a guitar. I do this because I can't not do it, and because it brings me so much joy to use my hands, and this is the way with which I can do it. But I love that I get to do something that makes somebody, really happy.
It's been 14 years since Jane built that first guitar with her dad. She no longer needs Wayne to oversee her work, but she often does her finishing work in his workshop in Rugby, where she spent weekends growing up.
My stamp in my guitars, has E.J. Henderson, where my dad says W.C. Henderson. They both say Rugby, Virginia on them, and I never changed that. I'm not going to, no matter where I move, it'll always say that because that's my heart's here and my dad's here. So
I've just always had that interest, in guitar making, and can imagine you're young and doing it too. There can't be nothing much more exciting or better than that. Seeing her figure out stuff like that, too, is pretty exciting to do and as big as anything I can think of.
Sometimes when Jane visits, Wayne coaxes her to play music together, though Jane says she's not the musician, her dad is.
I don't really want to do it. I don't know.
Let's play Freight Train. You can do that.
I do G, right?
Today, Wayne is playing a guitar Jane made for the songwriter and guitarist Doc Watson, who was also a close family friend. Doc died a week before the guitar was finished.
This is a guitar she made for Doc, and it's made out of white oak. That's that board she's talked about finding down there.
Jane is playing one of her dad's favorite instruments, a ukulele she made for him as a birthday gift. This ukulele has special meaning for her.
The present was, look what you did for me. See what you showed me, that I can make something really special, and that's just because of you.
For Inside Appalachia, this is Margaret McLeod Leaf in Rugby, Virginia.
Those first two stories are part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in our region. For more Folkways stories, visit our website, wvpublic.org. Coming up, Appalachia went from a piddling number of books about queer life to a veritable explosion of new writing. A new book of essays adds to the growing body of work by queer Appalachian writers. That's after the break. You're Inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, focusing on students' futures. Classes available at concord.edu/apply.
The number of books and articles about Appalachia's LGBT communities has exploded since 2018, including recent works like Nima Avashia's Another Appalachia and Willie Carver Jr.'s Gay Poems for Red States. Now a new collection of essays explores the intersection of queer Appalachian life and the environment. The book is titled Deviant Hollers, Queering Appalachian Ecologies for a Sustainable Future. It's edited by Zane McNeil and Rebecca Scott. I spoke with McNeil back in 2022 about another collection they edited called Y'all Means All. In it was a quote that stuck with me. It's from an oral history interview Ray Geringer did with a young, queer Central Appalachian organizer named Kenny Bilbrey. I recently spoke with Zane McNeil about the new collection, and I started by asking them about that quote from Bilbrey. And they said they, quote, feel like a part of being Appalachia is inevitably queer. Whether or not you identify as queer, I think the whole experience is, end quote. So can you elaborate on that idea and how it plays into your work?
Yeah. So with the All Means All, I feel like we really wanted to say that we're here, we're queer, we're really happy to be here. And it's people can survive, they can thrive in Appalachia. Deviant Hollers and, really brought from that quote by Kenny is thinking that there is something inherently queer, not just about being LGBT in Appalachia, right? But the whole region itself. Something I was really interested in coming into this project was this idea of queer ecologies, which is saying that regions and spaces can themselves be queer in different ways. And I feel like we see this a lot in Appalachian writing, right? Is Appalachia being othered or stereotyped by outside regions, to be scapegoated, right, in elections, to have our mountains, torn apart for capitalist interests outside of it. And so, and the all means all, we were really interested in being LGBT in Appalachia, right? And Deviant Hollers, I think we have a larger project of thinking through the region itself as other, as deviant, as just different, and what we can gain from that kind of frame.
It's interesting because some of a lot of the ideas about ecology and queerness and Appalachia as a deviant other, they very much align with my experience covering the resistance against the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And in fact, you have a writer who discusses that topic. How has that campaign against the Mountain Valley Pipeline informed your work in this topic area?
I feel like they were one of the first groups I knew about, just the advocacy they do. And I feel like from their discourse on their social media and what I know from them, they really feel aligned in place. And as Chet mentions, who did the book chapter on the pipeline protesters, it's a very queer and trans space. And a lot of their work is really anti-capitalist, really focused on environmental justice and thinking through how queer advocacy and environmental advocacy has to be connected to create a more sustainable future. And so with Deviant Hollers, I think I come to Appalachia as a region and as a place through that framework, right? What can we gain if we think not just about LGBT people here, but really queer advocacy and what that means for cishet people as well, and why it's necessary for our region to continue to exist, right? Past this sort of sacrifice zone that we're in right now, where outside companies come in and just tear us apart for capital.
As someone who's done this work, you talked about growing up in Morgantown. What's your experience been like, and how has that overlaid your work editing these books?
I feel like I don't have the same experience as some other folks do being queer and growing up queer in Appalachia. I mean, I faced my own kind of dysphoria. And my biggest issue, I think, growing up was not having a vocabulary to understand my queerness and my transness. Like pre 2010s, I feel like there just really wasn't the sort of societal discourse around being queer and trans, which is so funny for people now, right? Because now it's everywhere, but it's weaponized against queer and trans youth. So I think it's sort of a double-edged sword. And then it really wasn't until I left the region for my undergraduate and master's degree that I realized how special being queer in Appalachia is. And every time returning, because living in, like right now I'm in Denver and living in cities, right, with supposedly like really safe for queer and trans people, I don't really feel seen here. And I feel like I have to perform a lot. And I don't always feel safe, right? But going back to Morgantown, like I feel like I see queer and trans people all over the place, and I feel much more seen, and I feel much more understood.
And there's some discussion in the book about how queer life in Appalachia is represented or not represented. And it seems like 2018 was kind of a watershed year in that regard, where previous to that, you had fairly limited expression, or if it was there, but it was covered up or muted. Whereas since 2018, there's just been an explosion of writing about queer life in Appalachia. What happened in 2018?
For me, it's when Electric Dirt came out. It was a zine that was immensely popular, and it was one of the first times I'd ever seen a collection describing queer and trans life in Appalachia. It was organized by the collective Queer Appalachia, which ended up having its own issues. But for a lot of us, that was the first time we found a vocabulary. And, living in Appalachia, like I mentioned, my friends were queer and trans, but there wasn't a very visible movement or community in a lot of ways. And I don't think it's because of oppression, though I think that's part of it, like anywhere. But I just feel like once Electric Dirt came out, there was really a galvanization, I think, of queer and trans people in Appalachia. And I think part of that also was just because after 2016, we saw a lot of really weird media rhetoric around Appalachia because of J.D. Vance's memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, and the election of Donald Trump. I think there was all this discourse around Trump Appalachia, and a lot of that was erasing our experiences. And so 2018 with Electric Dirt, I feel like a lot of us were disenchanted with the way we were being represented, and we really wanted to fight to have our stories told and have an archive, right, that we can look back on. Because it's not like queer and trans people weren't here before, but we weren't able to have our stories published and preserved. And a lot of us were also doing PhDs or master's degrees because we wanted to do this research to inform political praxis and vice versa. And we were starting out, and we were really aggressive and really excited about this work. And so I feel like that turned into what now is a really thriving field in queer Appalachian studies.
We're living in a time now where we're hearing from a lot of vibrant voices in Appalachia's LGBT community. And there's more avenues than there have been for queer expression. But at the same time, elected officials around the region are targeting that same community, passing laws, restricting books on libraries, restricting expression. How are you processing this moment in Appalachia?
I was doing a book talk at Fairmont University, and a student asked me, it was about Y'all Means All, and like I said, we're all really idealistic in 2018, I feel like, and until the book came out in 2022, but it's very much like a moment in the late 2010s. And, they mentioned how difficult it is. They want to be here. They love the region. They don't have a lot of resources to leave it, right? But at the same time, politicians are attacking our right to exist. And it was a difficult moment for me for self-reflection, because a lot of the work that I do and the authors that work with me do are really utopic thinking. We're thinking about queer Appalachian futures and liberatory futures. I think you have to be a dreamer in a lot of ways. And at the same time, it gets increasingly difficult to dream these futures, I think, when my community is under attack in ways that really are meant to eradicate our existence, right? Like these anti-trans laws not only have a material effect on trans youth and trans people, but also are really meant to silence and censor and make us disappear from public life, especially, if you look at Project 2025, which is what the Heritage Foundation wants the next Trump administration, should he be elected, to be like. They align trans identities with pornography and say that we should be erased pretty much in every way possible. And it's very difficult emotionally and mentally to exist every day in a space that wants to regulate and kill you, or say that there's something wrong with you. Like West Virginia has maybe the highest rate of trans youth. Appalachia has thousands and thousands, if not millions, of trans and queer people. And so politicians voting against our own interests, against our community, is really harmful. But at the same time, I've seen activists who have stayed in West Virginia, fight against these laws every day on the Capitol, right? Despite all the horrible things that people and politicians say about them. I've seen collectives and mutual aid work to help get people the medical care and everything else that they need, right? Because the only people that keep us safe are us. And so the solidarity work happening in Appalachia, I think, really speaks to the utopic thinking that I've tried to hold on to, that these politicians and our government in a lot of ways, right, is never, it's like it can be used as a kind of harm reduction, I feel like, right? These laws are affecting people, getting them overturned or having them not pass as a kind of harm reduction. But at the same time, it's these community groups and our communities in general that is doing the work to make sure we're all safe.
Zane McNeil, thank you so much for talking to us on Inside Appalachia.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Deviant Hollers, Queering Appalachian Ecologies for a Sustainable Future, is available from University Press of Kentucky. new law in West Virginia allows people who have concealed carry permits to take a firearm onto the campus of any of West Virginia's colleges and universities. The law took effect at the start of July. West Virginia Public Broadcasting's Chris Schultz spoke with folks in higher education about how they're preparing for guns on campus.
Small amounts of ammunition, close it up, be on their way.
Brian Selmeski is showing the utility of one of Fairmont State University's new gun locker rooms on the ground floor of a residence hall.
So for this side of campus, we've installed 24 safes. In the other residence hall, we have 48 gun safes. They are both in rooms that are cinder block construction.
Selmeski is the chief of staff at Fairmont State University, where the infrastructure is largely in place for the July 1st implementation of Senate Bill 10, commonly known as campus carry. The law requires all colleges and universities to allow concealed carry permit holders to have weapons on campus with certain limitations, such as at large campus events and in residence halls, hence the lockers. Selmeski says the university is looking at campus carry as an opportunity.
We have constituencies that have strong opinions, some pro, some con. How do we ensure we are ideologically neutral and use this as an opportunity to model the sort of civil discourse that universities are here to help foster and that our country really desperately needs right now?
After many attempts spanning more than 5 years, Senate Bill 10 passed the West Virginia legislature during the regular session in 2023. Previously, each university decided for themselves whether to allow firearms on campus, with most opting against. West Virginia University President Gordon Gee and Marshall University President Brad Smith published a joint statement during the session in opposition of the law.
We don't have the luxury of taking an opinion or taking a position on this law. We need to, especially to model that civil discourse that I keep coming back to, make students who choose to exercise this right feel comfortable. We also need to be cognizant of the fact that it makes some of their student peers uncomfortable. So the last thing we want to do is comply with the letter of the law in a way that creates tensions between students. That's how we're approaching the lockers.
SB 10 included no state funding for its implementation, and at the onset there were concerns about the ultimate cost. Fairmont State estimates they spent just over $13,000 on signage and gun lockers, but that doesn't include other line items. Marshall University appropriated around $300,000 to prepare for campus carry. Officials at WVU estimate they have spent around $1 million across their 3 primary campuses to comply with the law. Governor Jim Justice signed SB 10 in March of 2023, and schools have had the ensuing 16 months to prepare. They've used all the time given to them, forming committees and holding campus conversations. WVU's Board of Governors approved their campus carry rule in April. Fairmont State's governors approved theirs less than 3 weeks ago, in June. Corey Ferris is the Dean of Students at West Virginia University, where students will be able to access gun lockers at residence halls at a cost of $140 per semester.
Well, I'd say we're pretty much ready. I mean, we still probably have a few stickers to put up on some of the offices, and then just this last-minute communication, just reminding people that July 1, the law takes effect.
WVU allows single-occupancy offices to be exempt from campus carry. Speaking in front of a gun locker room in a residence hall on WVU's Morgantown campus, Ferris says just over 320 staff members have requested their offices be exempt. This is significantly higher than the number of students that have requested access to the new lockers so far, of which there are 120 on the Morgantown campus alone.
And I can tell you on our campus, we've had 4 students who are living in the residence halls who've made that request. Potomac State, 0 students have made that request. WVU Tech, 1 student has made that request for a locker.
West Virginia is now the 12th state to allow campus carry, and officials at all of the schools that WVPB contacted for this story said they had spoken with their counterparts in states like Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee that have already implemented their own versions of campus carry. Ferris says colleagues at other state schools have told him implementation is the hardest period.
We weren't doing a one-time build. We're building this out for many years, and so we just want to be ready and not underprepared. It's better to be overprepared.
Schools across the state will be reassessing their approaches to storage, restrictions, and many of the other smaller details of campus carry for years to come.
Until we get it up and running and tweaking it. No plan survives first contact. So we'll see how it works out.
James Terry is the director of public safety for Marshall University. He says their emphasis will be on personal responsibility.
We put the responsibility on the permit holder. If they're going to live in the residence hall, they have to lease a gun safe from a vendor, which we already have. We did not build a safe room or gun room.
Terry says education is just as much for concealed carry permit holders on campus as it is for the rest of the population. That is one of the intangibles that schools will have to address moving forward, especially the perceptions around having firearms on campus and in classrooms.
The big cultural shift for us will be just educating the public on what concealed carry is. You read the law, it has to be concealed at all times. But if it prints on the shirt, it's still concealed if it's underneath that shirt. So we're talking about our responses to that.
Solmeski says the gap between being safe and feeling safe on campus can create tension.
Statistically, campus carry does not increase the risk of gun violence on campus. That does absolutely nothing to make people feel safe. It's a number. It's not their lived reality.
Whether the school communities are ready or not, the schools themselves have the necessary infrastructure in place this morning. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Chris Schultz in Morgantown. "60% of Kentucky counties don't have an OBGYN. That's according to new numbers from the U.S. Health Resources and Services Administration. WEKU's John McGarry visited one of those counties in eastern Kentucky to see how women and their healthcare providers are coping.
Estill Medical, this is Madison. How may I help you?
It's a few minutes before lunch at Estill Medical Clinic in Irvine.
Yes, I was calling.
The practice is owned by nurse practitioner and Estill native Donna Isford. It offers many services, but like every other medical facility in the county, no OBGYN.
Many of my patients at least have to travel anywhere from 30 minutes to 60, 70 minutes just to get to obstetrical care. There's just not any here. We have no nurse midwives here. I do family practice, so I do a lot of women's health at my clinic, but not prenatal care.
Estill County does have a hospital, but a spokesman for Markham and Wallace says not counting unplanned births in the ER, they haven't delivered babies since 1986.
Give me just a second and let me get you over to her nurse and I'll see if she can help you, okay?
According to a 2023 report by the March of Dimes, women living in what some call maternity care deserts like Estill and several nearby counties must travel more than twice as far to get the care they need. Multiple studies conclude that greater distance puts women, expectant and otherwise, at greater risk. Isford says she and her staff work closely with the Estill County Health Department to provide the help they can and out-of-county referrals for services they can't provide. Some think Kentucky's maternity care deserts may spread.
Good afternoon and welcome.
At the June 24th rally in downtown Lexington to mark the 2-year anniversary of the Supreme Court's toppling of Roe v. Wade, second-year medical student Shreya Dadwani painted a bleak picture.
The Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education requires that OBGYN residents have access to abortion training. This isn't about politics. It's about ensuring that we have the comprehensive skills needed to provide the best possible care for our patients. Without this training in Kentucky, we're left with no choice but to leave and pursue our education elsewhere.
In a recent survey of students at Kentucky's 3 medical universities, 62% of respondents said they're considering finishing elsewhere because of the state's near-total abortion ban. A week later, University of Kentucky healthcare officials unveiled a plan that could help some women in rural areas. The Outreach Division of UK Women's Health OBGYN announced they'd add services at 19 new sites, several in eastern Kentucky. Dr. Emily DeFranco is chair of UK Healthcare's Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. She says they're also expanding telehealth services.
We'll send a sonographer with an ultrasound machine to the site, and they'll perform the ultrasound. And then virtually, by telemedicine, the physician who is in Lexington is able to view the images from the ultrasound and then have a video conference with the patient at that site and counsel her about the findings.
That sort of outreach could eliminate some of the long trips many women must make for routine care. There's another program funded in part by Medicaid and tobacco settlement dollars that helps expectant and new mothers, HANDS, which stands for Health Access Nurturing Development Services. It's available to all women during pregnancy through a child's third birthday. At the Estill Health Department, Teresa Talbot is the ongoing home visitor, dropping in weekly with 15 to 20 families per year for the last 17 years.
We're not coming in to look at your home. We're not coming, to tell you what to do. We're just coming in and giving you the information and helping you along with it.
One woman she's helping now is Whitney Bingham, who happens to be the health department's WIC program coordinator. Talbot, who Bingham calls TT, is assisting her and her 2-year-old son through challenges ranging from potty training to car seat installations.
When TT left my house for the last visit, Asen, that's my son, he was at the door and he did not want her to leave. Like, he never wants her to leave. So, that's a good thing.
Still, Bingham says when it's time for her to leave for an OBGYN visit, she makes the hour-long drive to Lexington. I'm John McGarry in Estill County.
There are a lot of different kinds of bamboo, more than 1,400 varieties, ranging from tiny, scrub-like plants only a few inches tall to others that top out around 130 feet. The most common variety in the U.S. is golden or fishpole bamboo. Native to China, it was introduced in 1882. It's sometimes used for landscaping, but can be wildly invasive. America has a native species of bamboo too. It was once commonly found in Appalachia near rivers and streams, but was nearly wiped out. As Radio IQ's Roxy Todd reports, a group of mostly volunteers is trying to restore the plant in southwestern Virginia.
It's hard to imagine someone more enthusiastic for a plant than Laura Young is about river cane.
We are looking at baby river cane plants. Little scraggly things, but they have a lot of charisma.
Young works with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. We're standing beside her truck, and in the bed are 4 little plants growing in sandwich bags. They're humble little things, little more than stalks of grass. They look a little like bamboo plants.
River cane is really amazing for stabilizing stream banks.
Young says this plant helps prevent erosion and can withstand floods. It can also prevent the spread of invasive plants. As babies, river cane are a few inches tall, but eventually they could grow to 30 feet. River cane is grown commercially, but the plants are difficult to find and fairly expensive. In 2021, Young and 10 volunteers started growing river cane in sandwich bags, using roots from an existing strand in Lee County. They nursed the plants on their porches. After the plants were big enough, they transplanted them along the Powell River.
We saw that this needed to come back since it exists in so small of an area of its native range, and it does so many amazing things.
River cane used to grow along just about every river and stream bed in the eastern and central United States. Many indigenous people used river cane to make baskets and weapons, and they helped maintain the plant. But with more development along riverbanks, river cane began to disappear.
The river's really beautiful. We like to look at it, so we clear off the vegetation so you can see it.
Cows also like to eat it, which is another reason it faded from the landscape.
Apparently it's really delicious. So cows have come through and really just mowed that down.
There's even a traditional fiddle song called Cattle in the Cane. Young says this plant plays an important role for several animal species.
It's great for habitat for migratory songbirds, and then there's also a lot of rare moths that we track that this is a specific host plant for. So this is the only thing that those moths can eat. If this plant is not there, the moths are not there.
The first year Young and her small army of volunteers grew river cane, the results were better than she'd hoped for. And it doesn't take a lot of technical expertise to grow these plants.
This is something that a 6th grade class could do.
Young began recruiting more volunteers and scaled up, planting more river cane. Local colleges and universities also pitched in to help grow the young plants until they're ready to be transplanted.
It was absolutely amazing, and I feel like the community's really excited about this because it's so important and you can see it working.
Young says the strand they started in 2021 is thriving.
It's beautiful, and it's doing really, really well, and it doesn't need our help anymore.
This year, they started 1,000 river cane plants and added new sites along the Clinch River in St. Paul. The plants are just off a walking trail, so people can see them easily. Young says she hopes they can eventually expand into other watersheds across Southwest Virginia to help river cane return to the landscape. In St. Paul, I'm Roxy Todd.
Lightning bugs, or fireflies, add a touch of magic to summer evenings in the mountains. And they're the stars of a festival at a farm in Forest County, Pennsylvania. As WPSU's Ann Danahy reports, the farm draws lightning bug fans and researchers looking to learn more.
Looks like she actually might still have some eggs left. This is a day-active firefly. It's called Lucidota atra. They light up when they are in the larval stage, but not in the adult stage.
Sarah Lauer is an assistant professor of biology at Bucknell University. She's giving me a lesson in firefly anatomy, including how to tell the difference between a male and a female in one particular species.
His antennae are like super long and luscious.
Lauer has an educational display set up at this year's Pennsylvania Firefly Festival, but she's also there to do research. She was a graduate student and part of a team of researchers that visited the area in 2012. They were trying to find out if the flashing going on was in fact Photinus carolinus, and it turns out it was.
This is a species that's really well known from the Smoky Mountains because they have this huge summer emergence. They all come together in the forest and they actually synchronize their flashes.
Lauer says there are a few hypotheses about why the males synchronize. One is that the females reply to the males when they take a break. That way the males can see the female response. Another idea is that a bunch of males come together in one area to attract members of the opposite sex.
This is like the it bar or the happening scene of the firefly land.
Peggy Butler is secretary of the Pennsylvania Firefly Festival. The event happens on the farm she and her husband Ken have in Kellettville in northwestern Pennsylvania. After the scientists confirmed the synchronous firefly in 2012, the festival followed.
We thought it might be a good idea to celebrate that firefly because Pennsylvania's state insect is a firefly.
That festival grew over time, drawing people from all over.
Eventually, it got to the point where we had 1,000 people in one night to come see these fireflies, and we knew that we had an issue because there is such a thing as loving something too much.
Now Butler says it's a smaller educational event. They use a lottery system to have about 50 people a night and take steps to not disturb the fireflies.
The life cycle is all on the ground. The only thing that's flying around in the air are the male fireflies showing off to the females. So everything is on the ground. So when we're walking through this habitat, we could be stepping on the next generation fireflies. It takes a firefly about 2 years to go from egg to adult insect.
Butler says the synchronous fireflies like it to be warm and muggy in the forest, and the weather this night is perfect. But before sitting down to watch those synchronous fireflies, we take a short walk to see what else is happening.
You can see them right on the lawn here.
There's one right in the middle of the path here. Go ahead around me.
Kathy Barclay from Somerset took it upon herself to serve as a crossing guard to protect one of the fireflies glowing from the ground.
I am guarding one, yeah.
Barclay says she loves watching the fireflies at home.
One of my favorite nighttime activities is to just sit on the deck, but we don't have the synchronous. So we really came here tonight to see the synchronous fireflies.
After a walk back and into the woods, it's about 10:30 at night, and the synchronous ones have started.
You're lining up along the edge here, facing towards your left right now, and that's where all the action's happening.
Visitors line their chairs up along the path on the edge of the woods to see the light show. Ken Butler says the synchronous fireflies are like a wave at a stadium.
Here, this group, typically the leader starts from left to right. So if you watch this, they're really synchronizing now the whole length. So they're starting down here, and they all go dark, like that. And then you look to your left, and you'll start to see the blinking start down here, and then it just sort of works its way up. Then these guys start, and it just keeps going like a wave.
Mary Sweeney from Oil City was there with her friend and neighbor.
I've seen fireflies my whole life, but this I will probably never see again.
While the fireflies in Pennsylvania will be done with mating season soon, the research continues. Lauer's current work is studying fireflies that do not produce light. Instead, researchers believe they emit pheromones and use smell to communicate. In Kellettville, I'm Ann Danahy.
Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Jeff Ellis, Blue Dot Sessions, John Ingram, Paul Loomis, and Frank George. Bill Lynch is our producer. Xander Alloy is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editors Mallory No Pain and Jennifer Gorin. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe or stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, offering 31 bachelor-level degrees and 6 master-level degrees for students of any age. More information at concord.edu.
Started keeping score from the Jump Street sign, with an armored smile and a cold steel spine. No matter where I go, I can't cut the fall. That's why they call me the underdog. But I don't mind, because I don't know better. Never got the taste of victory. Water off my back like the rain off a feather.